Hi, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Joel Hunter here with Artemis, the philosophy cat. She's somewhere stalking about. Oh, she's over here at the window, checking out the birds that have taken up nest in our lantana just outside the window. She loves this. Well, it is coming to an end, believe it or not, this semester. It's been a long semester, and we have 2 more weeks. And what I want to do is give you this final video to say goodbye, but also to help you prepare to finish very, very strong in these last 2 weeks. What I want to do is I want to go through a few slides with you in our standard way of doing that, and I'll go through the quizzes, and I'll go through especially the final analytical essay, which is 20% of your grade. And I also have some housekeeping things we'll talk about. But the other component that I want to make sure to bring to your attention, especially if you are watching live, or if you're watching on the replay on Google+. Okay, this is the actual Hangout replay rather than the YouTube replay. If you watch it on Google+, you can look at the showcase that I've set up. And what I did is I gave you links to each of the websites that I've recommended for your final analytical essay, for the research part of that, sites that you can go and look up articles. And so I would encourage you to check out the showcase after we're done, or during this broadcast if you're live. So with that, that's what we're going to do. Is we're going to take a look at some material that I have here ready for you, as well as the slides, and going to go through step by step the final analytical essay. This may run more than 30 minutes. Mine usually do, I guess. But I want to make sure that you have all the information you need, and at least a basis for you to think about and ask questions if something isn't clear that I'm going to be talking about. So with that, let me actually first pull up the showcase so that you can see it in the sidebar. Now, if you're watching, again, not on YouTube, because YouTube strips this out, but over here to the, I guess it's your, well, it's right. It's to the right. There's a sidebar to this video that shows a number of links to websites. It actually gives you a little preview too. So I'm just scrolling down it myself as I talk to you. Now, the sites that I recommended that you do your research for your final analytical essay, I've given you a fairly wide selection of them. And for example, most of them are what I would call politically centrist. But I also gave you two that I think are well written and substantive positions that represent the political right. That would be Commentary Magazine, and the political left, that would be Jacobin Magazine. So if you're welcome to look at any and all of these as the place where you want to do your research on your topic. But just to let you know that most of them are, I would say, politically in the middle. So with that said, I'll just run down the list here that I have in this showcase and just read them out to you. So there's, of course, Commentary, which is, I would say, on the right. Then there's Atlantic, which I would call it center right, but in the center. Then we have Economics and Foreign Affairs, which, by the way, Foreign Affairs would be good for topics like terrorism and torture in particular. Harper's Magazine, Hazlitt, and that is focuses on culture and things like that. So it cover a wide variety of stuff. I mentioned Jacobin. Then the Morning News, which is sort of an online magazine, wide in scope. Just about all of our topics, you could easily find something there. The New Republic, and finally the New Yorker. So all of these are links are provided in your handout, the PDF handout, which you can find in multiple places in our course Canvas. You can look under Files, and look for Final Analytical Essay. You can also click on the links to the PDF that I provided in both the announcement for the assignment, as well as, I think there was two announcements, probably when I first posted it, and then the most recent one where I was announcing this Hangout. So anyway, it should be very easy to find that assignment handout, and you will need to review it, which I'm going to do with you now today, but you will need to review it also on your own, because there are steps that you have to complete in order to do the essay properly. And I have put some of those steps on the quizzes. So steps, for example, steps 1 through 4, which is more of the research side of the topic, the assignment, are going to be, you're going to provide material answers on quiz 13 about, like which website did you pick? What's the article? What's the topic? That kind of thing. Very basic stuff. But the point is, you get credit for completing that work ahead of time, on time, I should say, not ahead of time, but on time, and you will get credit on your quiz. So that will help your quiz grade if you simply do those steps for the final analytical essay. Then on quiz 14, which is your last quiz, there are 2 more steps. Now, these are going to require a little more effort. So I've given you more time, obviously, to do those, and we'll go through those when we get there. But the point being that make sure that you look at the assignment handout and that you understand what you need to do. And if there's any questions about those instructions, then you need to contact me sooner, much sooner rather than later, because successfully completing the individual steps before you turn in the final essay is going to help you on your quiz grades for this week and for next week. So I hope that's clear. I wanted to sort of give you an incentive to get ahead in the work for this essay, because it's, it's an essay, but it's also a small research project, and it is a synthesis of the theories that we've been studying in the class, as well as picking out a particular moral problem area that interests you. And you're bringing multiple things together. It's in some ways kind of complex, but I've broken it down into the steps to hopefully make it manageable for you, as well as spread it out over the span of 2 weeks, or really 3 weeks, because you have that extra week to turn in the essay. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. And so the research part of it, which is stuff you'll want to get done this week, you can use this video and check out the showcase, check out the links on the assignment, and go and do your research. Okay, all right. So let's now turn over to the slides, actually, and see if I can manage to do this correctly. Okay. Wow. Fantastic. Good. Week 13, and it should say week 13 through 15, because we're going to be compressing all the final weeks here into one glorious video. Okay, so let's talk about we're going to cover housekeeping items. I'm going to go through those shortly here. The quizzes 13 and 14, which are your final 2 quizzes, I'm going to go over those briefly. And then, of course, the bulk of the time we're going to spend on the final analytical essay, which is 20% of your grade. And I want to make sure that you thoroughly understand the expectations, as well as what you need to do. And what I guess one thing I want to say about my instructions is I like to be thorough. And so I give you lots of information. And sometimes this can create a sense of overwhelm. And I want to encourage you not to be overwhelmed by the amount of information that I've provided in the assignment instructions. Instead, I'm trying to give you as much information as you will need to do an excellent job on this assignment, as well as anticipate some of your questions. So I like to overdo the information rather than underdo it, and then have to, there's a delay then in you being able to complete the assignment. Anyway, that's my thinking for it. And so I just want to encourage you, don't be overwhelmed. Look at it as sort of thorough instructions. Okay. And lastly, Q&A. If anyone here is live and wants to ask questions on the fly, I'll be ready to do that once we're done with the slides. Okay, so actually I'm back up and just mention a couple housekeeping things. So one of you pointed out to me that quiz 12, which you just completed, had been strangely put into this category of imported assignments. And I think I know why that was, is because I had copied and edited an earlier version of this quiz from a different course. And so I think that's what happened. And I didn't move it into the quiz assignment category. Anyway, I've corrected that so that the actual grade for quiz 12 shows up in your quiz grade. So that's taken care of. And you won't have that funky column in your grade report of imported assignments. So that's done. The other thing I should note is that I think in part of the same step of this, I had gotten the due date wrong for the quiz. Most of you just blew right through it and you turned it in right when you knew you should turn it in, which was according to the syllabus. So you ignored rightly so, you ignored what I had on I had put incorrectly on the Canvas version of the quiz, and you turned it in by the 24th when it was actually due. So good for you. At least a couple of you noticed this problem. I don't know what my deal was with quiz 12, why that was such a challenge. But anyway, I've straightened it all out, and there's no ill effects to your grade, certainly. And I appreciate you all helping me out there. Okay, so that's quiz 12. Number next is let me talk about the status. So of the grades, and I'm speaking cumulatively here. So there's about 35 of you total in the class in two sections. And I'd say the average, last time I checked it for the quizzes, was about 74%. So I've noticed in starting with quiz 8, which is when we turn to the applied ethics, when we're looking at specific moral problems, and those are very different kinds of readings than you had in the first half of the course, which was more of a textbook explanation of different theories. So there was an adjustment, I understand, in your quiz performance, because you were having to do really in some ways a closer reading than you did in the first half, to understand what the arguments were in these articles. So I noticed a little initial drop off, I'd say between quizzes 8 and 10, and then it really started to pick up quizzes 10 through 12, back up to nice high levels. In particular, I noticed the improvement for most of you on the essay questions, that were at the end of each of those quizzes. So I appreciate you paying attention to the comments I left you, digesting those, and working to improve then your essay answers. By the way, for those of you who are still sort of missing some of the basic things that you have to do on those essay questions, make sure that you're answering the actual question, and that you're providing specific quotations to back up your points. And be sure too that you prepare your answer ahead of time, so that you give yourself enough time to do a complete paragraph, and that it's polished and well thought out and organized. So I would just encourage those of you who maybe haven't noticed my comments or haven't taken my suggestions, that you do that with the final two quizzes that we've got, because you do have essay questions there. Okay, so overall, I mean, really, really nice job in getting getting your performance up on the last, I'd say, 3 quizzes. And good adjustment to the different kind of reading that we've had. So about the average then, what I'll do is, of course, I'm going to drop your lowest quiz grade. Don't forget that. So that's automatically going to bump up everybody's average. And at that point, if I determine that the quiz average is still below, C plus B minus, then I'll put in a few points for a curve or whatever, however many points are needed. But that's 80% of your grade. The quizzes are 80%. The final 20% is the final analytical essay, which that's what we're going to be talking about now. So don't don't disregard this final project, because it's a significant part of your grade. It's actually a whole letter grade. And then the last thing I had to talk to you about on these housekeeping matters is the course evaluations. So I got a notification that they are now available to you. So if you will go to the course canvas and look in the sidebar menu for the instructor course evaluations for our class, I'd really appreciate if you would take the time to complete that. And in particular, what I'm looking for, just as a means of growing professionally and getting better professionally at teaching an online course, is I'd like your feedback about some of the specific things that we've done, like having the Google Hangouts, making these videos, and how they have, whether they've been helpful or not, and any suggestions that you have to improve the communication that goes on in this class. I'd like, I always want to make sure that everybody feels connected, and that that your concerns and questions can be raised easily, and that I'm going to be responsive and stuff like that. And I felt that the videos were going to be a helpful way to do that. But I'd really like your feedback on that, and of course, any suggestions, any criticisms. I'm always looking to improve. So I'd appreciate you taking the time to complete the course evaluations. Okay, so that's housekeeping. Let's move on then to quiz 13. And this is going to be due, of course, on a Sunday at the latest. And your topic is terrorism and torture. It's fun stuff. I kid. Chapters 24 through 25. And you have two authors, Michael Walzer and Alan Dershowitz. And let me move on. Actually, I'm going to say something about these two articles. As you've probably noticed with some of the pairs of articles that we've done on a particular topic, they don't always exactly overlap. And in other words, they're not like taking an obvious pro and con position with respect to each other. Sometimes they take a pro and con position, but they're using different concepts, and they're really not talking about the same exact topic. Well, the same is the case here with this topic. And so I want to talk about your essay question for this quiz, and do a little explanation here, and hopefully sort of hone in on a possible area of confusion about this. So let's talk about this one. All right, I'm going to just read it out, and what I'll do is I'll interrupt myself and make some comments as we go, as I think is needed. Okay, given that counterterrorism might include acts like torture, does Dershowitz's position, that's the second article, correspond to the last resort excuse described by Walzer? Okay, let me stop real quick. So what I'm having you do here, obviously, is synthesize these two articles. I'm asking you to basically do a comparison of their arguments. And in particular, what I'm looking for you to do is have a really good understanding of the last resort excuse in the Walzer article. That's the first one. Now, what Walzer does is he gives an extended argument for why terrorism is never, or rarely, almost impossible to morally justify. Okay. And what he does is he does a critique of 4 excuses commonly given by those who defend terrorism in particular circumstances. Okay, so the number 1 excuse is the last resort excuse. So I'm going to have you look at what that actually means. But what I want you to do is to consider then how the practice of torture as a technique of counterterrorism. In other words, if you think of the ticking bomb terrorist, in other words, if you remember the show 24 or have ever seen that, this was a common, not common, but it came up where suppose we have in custody a terrorist, and suppose that terrorist has information about a bomb that is going to go off within a limited amount of time, and that that a terrorist is unwilling to cooperate just under normal interrogation procedures. And so the question will come up, is it permissible? Is it morally permissible in that circumstance where there could be hundreds or thousands of innocent human lives at stake? Is it permissible to torture that particular terrorist in order to hopefully get that information out and save those lives? So this is called the ticking bomb terrorist scenario. And Walser talks about it a little bit, but Dershowitz talks about it as sort of the central example for when he finds that torture would be morally justified. So what I'm asking you to do here is look at that particular action, torture as a counterterrorism measure, okay, and then the moral justification for it given by someone like Dershowitz. Is that the same thing as what Walser calls the last resort excuse for terrorism? Okay, except in this case, we're talking about counterterrorism. So that's what I'm asking you to do. All right. Now, if you think that Dershowitz's position does correspond to the last resort excuse, does Dershowitz avoid Walser's criticism of this excuse? Now I'm back to reading the actual essay question. Okay. So if you think that Dershowitz's position is equivalent to the last resort excuse, does Dershowitz avoid Walser's criticism of this excuse? Okay. And you give an explanation for why you think so. If Dershowitz's position is not the last resort excuse, if it doesn't correspond to that position, which kind of excuse for torture is it, or terrorism is it? Okay. And then what you have to do, as with all the essay questions, is support your answer with a clear argument. In this case, I'm going to give you a little more space, about 300 words. So, a fairly long paragraph. And so write that well-developed paragraph of, about 300 words to explain your position, explain your answer, and give an argument in support of it. And so part of giving a good argument is giving good support, and that support is going to involve specific evidence from one or both essays. So again, make sure that you quote at least one of the articles to substantiate your answer, and then provide the correct citation for that quotation. Okay, so that is your essay question for this week. So again, prepare your answer in advance, revise it, polish it, so that the final thing that you submit is in excellent shape. Okay, any questions, of course, you can come and not come and talk to me, but you can email me and get in touch with me, and I'll be glad to try to clarify anything that isn't at all clear as the blue sky. Okay, next is quiz 14. I want to go ahead and talk about your final quiz, which is going to be on the environment. That is our final moral topic. And your two articles, again, are on the same topic, but they raise different problems within that topic, or they answer different questions within that topic. But what I'm going to do, again, as with the essay question on quiz 13, I want you to be able to compare these two authors. One of the challenges is, of course, to figure out where is the common ground in order to compare two authors that are writing different arguments on different questions. So that's really the work that usually you would have to do I'm giving you some assistance on the quiz 13 because I ask you to use the last resort excuse as sort of the conceptual common point for them. Okay, now you have to figure out whether that concept works or not. In this essay, however, I'm going to be asking for you to figure out that common ground. So let's talk about this essay question. I'm going to start with by reading it. Both Paul Taylor and Thomas Hill argue that natural environments have inherent worth and should be given moral consideration. They differ on the grounds for that moral consideration. And in other words, they differ on what, let's say that an act is viewed as morally suspect, as morally right or wrong. Now, what is the wrong-making feature of that action? In other words, what makes it morally right or wrong? So the grounds is asking for that, the wrong or right-making feature of an action, okay? And so they differ then on what that, in this case, I'm going to be talking about a wrong-making feature. They differ on that. In other words, what are the moral criteria or criterion that is relevant to figuring out whether a specific action that affects the environment is morally right or wrong? Okay, so that's what we're looking for, and that's what you have to be aware of, is that they are bringing different perspectives. Okay, so let's talk about that. Back to the question. Part of this difference is due to the different theoretical frameworks they adopt, with Taylor arguing from a natural law perspective. Now I'm giving you this information, while Hill argues from a virtue ethics perspective. Okay, so right there, that gives you a clue as to the grounds for how they arrive at specific moral judgments is going to differ, because they're going to be applying different moral principles that are derived from those different theoretical frameworks. Okay, so natural law perspective, it's all about the fulfillment of the natural ends and natural functions of an organism. It's right if it fulfills it, if it's wrong if it doesn't. From a virtue ethics perspective, it's different. Okay, so the the task then for you is, picking up again with the question, which author do you think gives the best argument for why the wealthy eccentric acts immorally when he cuts down all the trees on his property and paves over his plants and yard with asphalt? Now, that's not a random example. That is an example that Hill opens his article with. And he talks about, now this is a virtue ethics perspective, he talks about why, for all the different reasons that we have this intuition or aesthetic response to such an action, as it makes us uncomfortable. We find it morally discomforting that the wealthy eccentric is okay with that. And we want to figure out, well, what makes us morally uncomfortable with that? What exactly is it? Okay, this is exactly his seeking the grounds for arriving at the specific moral judgment that it was wrong. Okay, that what the wealthy eccentric did was wrong. Okay, so he gives an account by kind of a process of elimination, by looking at the different answers that different theoretical perspectives would give as to the wrong-making feature of that act. And he finds from his perspective that none of them quite are satisfactory. For example, you might say, and from a theoretical perspective, say of contractarianism or Kantianism or any of the rights-based ethical perspectives, you might say that the wrong-making feature of what the wealthy eccentric did is that it did not respect the living organisms that were destroyed as a result of his action, that it violated the rights of those organisms to live. Okay, that's one possible answer. To do that is exactly what is the wrong-making feature from a particular ethical perspective. Okay, so he looks at that as well as other answers of the wrong-making feature and finds them inadequate. He thinks they don't quite capture what makes us morally uncomfortable with what this wealthy eccentric did. Okay. So in Taylor's case, he would argue that although he doesn't address this specific example, you can figure out the reasons he would find what the wealthy eccentric does as wrong. Okay. And it has to do with his biocentric account, biocentric ethics from the natural law perspective. Okay. And so you can look at his argument for the wrong-making feature of such an action. So what I'm asking you to do is not decide who you agree with, but I want you to argue for which author gives the best argument for that wrong-making feature. Okay? So you may disagree, say, with Taylor's perspective on this. You may disagree with his reasons for the wrong-making feature of what the wealthy eccentric does, but you may find that he gives the best argument for it. In other words, he gives the best reasoning and support with evidence for his position. Okay? So again, I don't want you to confuse this with you having to say who you agree with. You don't have to agree with the particular author you think gives the best argument. Okay? So that's that. Now let me finish up. Write a brief paragraph of about 100 words. So this is a really short one. This can be really concise and pithy, stating your answer and explaining your reasons. In other words, having and stating an opinion is not sufficient. You need to give reasons for your answer. So you can't just say, well, I think Taylor gives the best argument for why the wealthy eccentric acts immorally because I agree with the natural law perspective. No, that's an opinion. You need to give reasons for why you think Taylor gave the best argument. Okay? So that's the assignment in this essay question. So it's briefer. It's your last one. It's a little different than the others that I've given you. But again, if you have any questions about what's expected here, what you should be trying to do, by all means, get in contact with me. Okay, then. So that's your final quiz 14 essay question. Woo. All right. Now, the analytical essay. We need to talk about this, and I'm going to pop out of the slides. Let me just actually make sure. Yeah. So I'm going to pop out of the slides, and I'm going to move over to the actual handout, and I'll go through that with you. So let's come back to our show. Okay. What am I doing wrong? Okay. Think. There we go. Back we are. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful for the where we are in the class so far, as well as what to expect on quiz 13 and quiz 14, and those essay questions. So now let me go over to the final analytical essay and see what we've got. Actually, let me pop over to the Q&A and see if anybody's typed in a question yet. I see a few folks are here, so that's cool. Actually, since a few folks are here, let me pop in and just see if I can hear you. Okay. So let me then go over to the screen share again, and now we're going to do the essay. Okay. Right. If I can find it. Hello. No. This? No. There we go. Okay. Ta-da. Let me pop up to the top. Here we go. And so what I wanted to do is just simply go through this with you and answer your questions. Actually, let me change my things. Stand by. I'm going to put in my ugly headphones that actually I can hear better. Ta-da. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can speak and I can hear you. Okay. Sip of coffee. All right, gang. So you are going to have this final assignment for 20% of your grade, and it is a short essay, about 3 paragraphs. You can be longer if you need, but I'm looking for essentially a minimum of 750 words. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at a recent news article. Actually, it doesn't have to be recent, but I want you to find an article on an ethical problem in one of the topic areas that we've studied in the class and do an analysis of that article. Okay. So what I've done, of course, is provided you a number of links to sites that I recommend for you to do a search on the topic. And then your job then will be to identify then the topic that you want to do. Like, let's say the last one we were talking about was the environment, okay? And then you find an article that has to do with the ethics of the environment, of, you know, that could be animal rights. It could be broader, like the Taylor and the Hill articles. And then I want you to analyze the author's argument in that published essay or article. And it could be from a periodical like those, or the ones that I've published or that are published online that I've linked to. Then what I want you to do to sort of give you a lens for the analysis that you're going to do is I want you to adopt one of the ethical theories that we've talked about in the class, you know, maybe a Kantian perspective, and you're going to apply the theoretical tools of that perspective to the article, and that will help you do the analysis. Okay. So to complete this assignment, what I've done is not just said, here, go do this essay, but I've broken it down into steps that I want you to complete over these last 3 weeks of the class. And so only the final step is the final draft of your essay that you're going to turn in, and you're going to upload it to the assignment on Canvas. And I've already set that up for you. But you won't do that until the final week. So we're talking, yes, anytime starting May 8th is when you can upload your final essay, your final draft. So you got a couple weeks here. And so let's talk about the steps, because these are going to show up again, like I said, in your quizzes, these last 2 quizzes. All right, so the first thing you do is choose a topic. And what you're doing is looking at our syllabus from starting with week 8, where we started with the moral status of animals. So animal rights, or that's more narrow, but the moral status of animals, any article on that topic is fine. So you had the moral status of animals, we had poverty, we had hunger, we had abortion, we had affirmative action, we had enhancing human beings, in other words, genetic enhancement, we had terrorism, we have torture, we have the environment. So those are the topics. So choose one that interests you, and then you're going to go to the websites that I've linked. And by the way, you can choose a different website. If you find an article that you think is adequate to do the analysis, is substantive enough, then that's fine. You can put that in, give me the link, and I'll give you feedback as to whether I think it's going to work or not. And then if I don't think it's a good choice, a website or article, then I'll let you know and you can go pick a different one. So once you've picked your topic, then go research the topic. So go to all the websites and use their search function to look up articles on that topic. That's how I found the specific ones that I gave you examples of in this handout. Okay, so that's that. So those two items, you are going to fill in some blanks on quiz 13. So I put this in an essay question. You essentially have to fill in the blank, tell me what your topic is, and then tell me tell me the title of the article that you're going to be responding to, that you're going to do your analysis on, and give me the URL for the article. So that'll tell me which website it is. Okay, so that's steps 3 and 4 then. Identify one substantive article online on your chosen topic, and then record the title and the URL of the article. So steps 1 through 4, you're going to fill in the blanks for me on quiz 13. It's the final question. It comes after the essay question for quiz 13. So do that work before Sunday, before you take the quiz, so that you can get credit for that on the quiz. It's I can't remember if it was 3 points or 5 points or something like that. So if you do the work ahead of time, then you get quiz credit, which is good and awesome. Okay, so that's the first steps in the process of completing this assignment. All right, now, I actually give you the question as it appears on the actual quiz. So those are the blanks that you'll fill in. Now, what you've done so far is really the easy part, although it may take time because you may take a little bit of time to find an article that is going to work for you. But once you've done that, now what you got to do is begin your analysis. And so I found that this is the question that students most often have is, what do you mean analysis? How do I do that? And I like to think of it in terms of questions and answers. And so analysis means to break something down into its specific elements, right? When you analyze a chemical compound, you're breaking it down into its individual elements. And that's a good way to think of what you're doing here, is that you're looking at sort of the big picture is the article itself, the whole argument of the article, but then you're looking at the details. You're looking at the specific evidence that the author uses. You're looking at the reasoning that the article uses, the kinds of inferences the author makes, and so on. So that's what analysis is in this context. Okay, and so what I've done is presented you a series of questions that you will answer to help you do this analysis. So let's talk about those. What is the specific problem or question in the topic area that the author is discussing? Now, if you think back to what we were talking about on quiz 14 with the environment, I told you that the topic area was the same, which is protecting the environment and why we should do so. However, the problem or question was different for the two authors, because they're really answering two different kinds of questions. So that's what you want to do. You want to identify the specific problem or question that the author is discussing. Next, what is the author's argument? What main claim are they trying to advance, persuade you of, defend, etc., in response to the problem or question? What is their main claim? What is their answer? While you may find and cite a quote in the article that states the argument explicitly, it's often in the first paragraph or early on in the essay, try to express the author's argument in your own words. Paraphrase it, in other words. Okay, so that is the next and second thing to do. Next step. What is the author's evidence? What kind of reasons does the author cite or argue in support of his or her argument? So maybe there's statistical evidence. Maybe there's conceptual evidence. Maybe there's other kinds of empirical evidence, facts, right? Not necessarily of a statistical nature, historical evidence. So look at what the author marshals in support of his or her argument that is supposed to help establish the main claim, which was the second bullet point. Okay, so identify the evidence. And what's nice, or I think a good approach to doing this, is if you've identified the argument and you see the specific claims that the author is defending or claiming, then you can list those out and then sort of indented, think of an outline, indented, and underneath each of those claims, you can list the evidence that's cited to support those specific claims. Okay. Anyway, just a suggestion on that. Okay, next bullet point. How is the author's position contestable or controversial? In other words, what kind of counter evidence or counter arguments does the author raise or consider or address? So you've noticed in our articles that we've been reading since week 8, most of them will raise at least one counter argument to their own position. They'll consider counter evidence. What about this? What about that? That doesn't seem to support their position. And so what that does is it shows that they're not just simply stating facts, and they're not simply describing states of affairs or positions. They're not simply asserting views. They are arguing for them. And so what that does in addressing counter evidence, addressing counter arguments, is it's proving that, hey, they have to work to convince you to make a rational case for their position. That's what contestable means then. It means the position that they take can be contested. It can be challenged. It can possibly be refuted, or it could be supported. And so that's what makes actually an interesting position, is one that you can take different sides on, that doesn't simply have a yes or no answer. Okay, so have a look at the contestable part of the article, counter evidence and counter arguments. And by the way, if the article does not raise counter arguments or doesn't consider counter evidence, that's a strike against the article. That makes it weak. And so if your article happens to not have that, if your author doesn't do that, you should note that. And then you actually can talk about how this makes the article weaker, because it will. Okay. Now, last point then is, what is the author's ethical framework? Which normative theory or theories does the author imply or state as his or her perspective on or approach to the problem? Okay, so the thing that this should be actually fairly easy for you to do, or not, I shouldn't say that, because an author may or may not be very clear about this. What I mean to say is that this should be a familiar task to you, because you've been doing it on the essay questions that I have assigned on recent quizzes. Not on all of them, since quiz 8, but on most of them, I've asked you, okay, so which normative theory best represents this author's position? So that is another component to the analysis is to identify that framework that the author takes. Okay, so let me just pop up just a moment here and point something out to you, is that one thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be being explicit about your normative theory, the theoretical framework that you are going to be analyzing the author from. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to take the same perspective as the author. You can take a different perspective, much like, say, that last issue that I gave you. If let's say you're Thomas Hill, and you're taking a virtue ethic perspective on the question of the environment, and the specific problem is, hey, what's wrong with a property owner paving over, his grass and his plants and stuff? What makes that wrong? And from a virtue ethic perspective, you have an answer for that. But then you're also interacting with Paul Taylor, who takes a natural law perspective. And so you identify Taylor's ethical framework as, oh yeah, he takes a natural law perspective. And then if you're evaluating it, you're saying, okay, here's his argument, and here's how it works. Here's his evidence. Here's the counter evidence he raises. Here's the counter argument he addresses. But it is, here's maybe something it doesn't address, or here's why the answer is unsatisfactory. And that is then your ethical framework that you're bringing, maybe a virtue ethic perspective, just in this example. Okay, so what you're going to do then on quiz 14, the last quiz, is two things. You're going to have read the article very, very closely, do your basic note-taking stuff that we've talked about all along in the course, and identify and answer the analytical questions that I've just listed above. Okay. And those appear in the question on quiz 14. So that's step one. So you'll have those prepared and answer those for quiz 14. Then the next step is write a brief synopsis of the article. So here you're giving a summary of the author's article. What are the main points? So this is a broad view here, and what you're demonstrating to me is that you get the gist, the substance of the article, of what is the main point of the article, what are the key subpoints in the article, obviously the topic and things like that, and the question. So give a brief synopsis of the article. It should take you about 100 to 150 words. Okay, so those are the two steps that I want you to have completed by the following week, week 14. Okay, and you will get credit on that quiz for completing those two steps. All right, and that is those are the steps that you're completing over the next 2 weeks. And then the last step, of course, is to actually write the essay. Now, the reason I've had you do this in sort of an extended assignment here with these individual steps, breaking it down like this, is really to help you do that final step, which oftentimes, I've had the same issue. I know what I want to write about, but it's just getting started. Like, how do I start this thing? Where do I start? And it can be, you can get blocked. It can be hard. And so that's what I have done with the steps, the earlier steps, is to help you sort of get through that initial problem that a lot of us have in getting started on an essay. And you know how it is. I'm a procrastinator. And if I just have to do a big assignment, then I'm not going to get it done, until the last minute. And I don't want you to go through that, because almost always the quality of those essays is not going to be nearly as good. This isn't a summary article. I'm sorry, this isn't a summary essay. This is not, like a literary analysis. This is going to be a philosophical analysis. You're dealing with arguments and concepts and judgments. This is not easy stuff. And so you need time to digest the article as well as complete the steps, and then complete the essay. Now, if you've done the steps 1 through 6, then when you get to this point of writing the actual essay, a lot of the structure of your essay will already be clear to you. In fact, using the step 5 bullet points, the analysis part, you can figure out how to combine those and arrange those in a logical order to help you flesh out the entire essay. Okay, so let's talk then about step 7 in the detail hits here. Okay, what I don't want you to do is argue why you agree or disagree with the article. Okay, this is a common theme you've heard in my talks and in my quiz questions. Your task is to explain and elucidate the article, which will include, elucidate means to shed light on, to, well, it means kind of explain, but it means to bring new light to give a good take on. Okay, which will include your considered analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of the author's argument. That's what the bullet points were to help you do. Okay, in doing so, you will demonstrate that A, you have understood the author's position. B, you have understood the ethical framework the author is using and the criteria and principles which that theory applies to the problem. And C, you have shed light on how the author has contributed or not to a better understanding of the ethical problem at issue, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the author's conclusions. Okay, so that right there encapsulates what you are aiming for. This is the top of the golden mountain here for you. This is what you're trying to accomplish in that final essay. Okay, so now let's talk about the mechanics of things. So format, you use standard academic prose, don't use informal or colloquial expressions, and use good grammar, standard English grammar, usage, word choice, Don't avoid first-person pronouns. You should be free of mechanical errors. So I want you to use good punctuation, correct punctuation, paragraph structure, correctly indent things, and then citations for your quotes. Make sure that you follow those as I've asked you to do as well on the quizzes. Now the structure, I'm giving you some suggestions here, not suggestions, requirements for the structure, although you have a lot of freedom for it since, it doesn't have to be exactly 3 paragraphs, it could be more. But when it comes to the first paragraph, what I want you to do is introduce the topic and the question and problem and summarize the article. Now, summarizing the article is what you did in draft form, at least in step 6, if you remember that. And you're going to be giving that synopsis on quiz 14, the last quiz. So what you can do is take that material that you did, copy and paste it into your first paragraph, revise it as needed to improve it and to make it connect with the other material in the first paragraph. Okay, the remaining paragraphs carefully and methodically analyze the article. You may wish to use the questions in step 5 above as a way to help you arrange and organize the structure of these paragraphs in your essay, which I've already mentioned. Compose effective transitions between paragraphs, showing how the topic of the previous paragraph logically relates to the topic of the following paragraph. Okay, and you don't talk to the reader. You simply show say you have a paragraph that talks about the ethical framework of the author, and you are talking about that and the implications of that ethical framework for the particular topic that you're describing. And then the next paragraph is going to talk about the specific argument, is going to lay out the argument of the author and analyze that and the evidence. So what you would need to do is explain then in a sentence, a transitional sentence at the end of one paragraph, how the ethical framework then connects to the kind of argument that the author raises, how that shapes the argument, how it defines the concepts that the author uses in the argument, that kind of thing. So that would be a way to do such a transition. Okay, but the idea is you go from one topic to the next. You're not slapping ingredients together like in a hamburger, where the order doesn't matter, but you're showing how you're building on an understanding of the author's ethical framework, then to sort of drill down and get a microscope into his specific argument and how that ethical framework informs then the argument that the author then gives. Okay, so that's an example of what I mean there. Last bullet point, carefully support your analyses with relevant and specific quotations from the article. This is standard procedure here that you are familiar with already with doing the short essay paragraph questions on the quizzes. So you may also wish to cite our texts to help you describe and explain the normative ethical theory or theories assumed or stated by the author or yourself. Okay, but obviously you will be quoting the article to support your claims about what the author is saying. Okay, and so then the last thing on the assignment sheet is submission, and you upload your document to the final analytical essay assignment on Canvas no later than May 13th, 2016. Don't be late. Okay, gang. That, by the way, that assignment will open on May 8th, so you can turn it in as early as May 8th if you wish, but certainly no later than May 13th. All right. Then the sort of appendix to the assignment is I give you a list of the recommended websites. These are also on the showcase for this video, on Google Plus at least. And these I consider to be acceptable sources for doing your research and choosing your article. You can choose another one, but you need to run it by me and make sure that it's going to work. But if you find one from a different source that you think is awesome and you want to do, then by all means, let me know and I'll check it out and let you know if you can use it. Okay. So what I've done here in this list is I've given you the main link for each of the sources and then also giving you an example of an article that I found on that specific site about a specific topic. And I tried to pick one from each of our areas. So there's a topic on abortion in the Atlantic, a topic on hunger in commentary, the environment in economics, and so on. Okay, so you can look at those. Can you pick one of those? Yes, sure you can if you wish. But you are not limited to these specific examples. These are only examples, and I put them there really just to show you it's pretty easy to find an article once you've identified the topic you want to talk about. Okay, gang. So there is that. Let me pop back out to our show. Okay. Well, drop those things. Okay. So what we have then, let me just pop over, not to screen share, but to, over to the showcase. And just to remind you that, and you, by the way, can you can look at this on your own time. You can look at this on the replay if you use Google+. If you look at the actual Google Hangout replay, the showcase is there, and I've enabled all of the articles. Let me just double check real quick. So yeah, there's commentary, the Atlantic, Economics, Foreign Affairs, Harper's, Hazlitt, Jacobin, Morning News, New Republic, and the New Yorker. Yeah, so they're all there. They're all enabled, and you can click on the links there, or of course use the handout. Let me see here if there's anything else that I need to do with you or for you. I don't think so. Well, it has been a long actual meeting. I'm sorry it went so long, but went a full hour. But hopefully this was helpful to you, and that you have a real clear understanding of what's expected of you on quiz 13 and 14 and the final essay. And I appreciate you again also attending to the course evaluations. I'm always looking to improve, so please do complete that at your convenience. And I think that's all I have. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll be seeing you soon. Good luck on the next quizzes and on the essay. And again, any questions, fire off an email to me. I'll be glad to work with you. Take care and be seeing you.